Cold Snapdragon is an iconic snow plant in PVZ 2. It was added a long time ago, and since then it has been widely considered as an overpowered killing machine. However, what if I tell you that it's not? In today's video, we will attempt to beat the entire Plants vs Zombies 2 using only a level 1 Cold Snapdragon. Believe me, it isn't going to be the easiest task you could imagine. What about the rules of this challenge? Well, they're simple. First, I can only use Cold Snap and not a single other plant. Second, no leveling up, and third, no power-ups. I'm allowed to use plant foods throughout the level, but buying them with coins is of course forbidden to me. Without further ado, let's begin our Frosty adventure. Day 1 of ancient Egypt is going to be described with only one phrase: easy peasy lemon squeezy, as none of the local zombies could pose a significant threat to my cold body. However, you shouldn't consider this world as an easy one, as all the zombies that are tougher than the Conehead are already a significant threat to a Cold Snap. The following 5 days were skipped due to the inability to play with a Cold Snap, so next time we will stack with such levels, they will be skipped automatically. Day 7 began with an extra amount of sun in my pocket, which allowed me to place an additional Snapdragons across the first lines. If every single level in this game started with an extra 500 suns, the zombies would have no chance to enter the lane. Also, destroying a camel zombie using a Cold Snap is one of the most satisfying things you can do in ancient Egypt. Oh, I didn't actually see you, buddy. Day 8 was dedicated to a Tomb Raider zombie, which tried to impress me with its tombstones. However, it didn't take into account the fact that Cold Snap is a big fan of destroying cobblestones, so we weren't worried about its appearance. Oh yeah, extinguishing the torches is yet another hobby of Cold Snap. On day 9, we witnessed the first real threat approaching the lane, and that was the Buckethead zombie. You might think I'm joking, but unfortunately I'm not. Sure, if we have 2 lines of Cold Snaps, nothing and no one can stop us. But what if we have only a few Cold Snaps? What should we do in that case? That exact zombie is going to become the main threat throughout this time adventure. Day 10 was a usual one, since none of the dangerous zombies appeared on my lane. Once again, it's a great chance to tell you more about the details of this challenge. At first glance, this challenge may seem to be an easy one. However, when you dive deep into the details and try it on your own, you understand that everything isn't as easy as you might imagine it. Day 12 introduced us to a walking bunker known as Pharaoh Zombie. This body has a bit more HP than a Buckethead, but the low speed makes it less dangerous than a Buckethead. However, it is still a serious enemy, so we should always pay attention to stop it before the Pharaoh Zombie consumes a Cold Snap. That's how it works. Day 13 included some funny slimes at the back of the lane, which immediately became friends of my Cold Snapdragons. Once again, camels along with Coneheads can pose a significant threat to me due to their low amount of HP and slow speed. Day 14 included some more cobblestones along with pharaohs, so it was gratifying to break both of them. Unlike some previous levels, this one had a faster pace, which made the gameplay much more enjoyable. On day 15, we received a fantastic opportunity to plant even more Cold Snaps, as this time we had to defend my lovely sunflowers, which were placed on the banana cells. You know what? I love bananas. They taste especially good when you freeze them. With so much sun in my pocket, freezing everyone around was easier than a tower was. 11 frozen bunkers out of 10. On day 16, I decided to have some fun, so that's why I used a few plant foods right after the final wave to finish some of the last zombies on my lane. The Ice Breath of Cold Snapdragon is a fantastic weapon against all kinds of zombies. On day 17, I managed to gather a whole stack of plant foods, which is by far a remarkable achievement, since none of them were used while beating the level. As you may see, ancient Egypt is going pretty smoothly, but that's just the beginning, because some of the next worlds are going to be much tougher than this one. Day 18 was the first least-end level dedicated to camels. In such a situation, the only thing we need is 2 lanes of cold snaps, which are able to deal with all the upcoming zombies. No, seriously, this is the right amount of snapdragons to deal with 90% of the zombies, and if something goes wrong, you can always plant the 3rd line, which wasn't necessary in our situation. Day 19 repeated one of the previous levels, but this time with a high number of bucket heads. However, we were lucky enough not to spend the plant food on the upcoming enemy, so the level was beaten without using a plant food. On day 20, we had to defend with more sunflowers placed on the banana cells. It allowed me to gather so much sun that at one point I didn't know where to put some of the next snapdragons, as all the best cells were already occupied by either sunflowers or previous cold snaps. It is one of the rare cases when you hear about a massive amount of sun in this challenge. On day 21, numerous zombies attempted to eat my snapdragons, but luckily they appeared too late to consume at least one of them, since the defense line had already been formed at that point. Don't you even think about eating them, walking coffin. On day 22, we have reached the point where the 3rd column of snapdragons began to form. It is possible because I spent an insane amount of time beating a single level, as the level's pace decreases to its bare minimum due to the fact that zombies are destroyed very slowly. It took me 8 minutes to beat this level, which is a lot. Day 23 was one of the most interesting levels of ancient Egypt, as this was the first time we met Gargantuar in a battle of ice and powerful smashes. When we encountered our final enemy, we already had a strong defense line and enough plant foods to counter it. As a result, a big boy was countered using 2 of them, and we also planted an additional cold snap at the back of the lawn to counter an imp zombie. 11 floppas out of 10. Day 24 was yet another last-stand level on which I planted 3 lanes of cold snaps to stop a massive zombie attack. This level is a prime example of what I previously said when I mentioned that this plant has its weaknesses and it isn't as overpowered as many people consider it. Look, I've got 3 lanes of cold snaps, but walking coffins are still able to consume some of them. The only weapon I have in such a situation is a plant food, but I don't like to use it when it's not necessary. With that being done, we are moving to the piracies. Day 1 is always the easiest one, since none of the unique zombies had appeared on that level. Oh, except for a bungee friend, which was countered even before making the first step on the lawn. I consider it a huge success, my fellow ice cubes. Day 2 was a bit harder due to the appearance of a seagull zombie, which is going to become a significant threat throughout the piracies. Yeah, this little bird will create so much trouble for us. However, once you plant a full lane of cold snaps, they can do nothing to you. Day 3 was a full copy of Day 1, so I've got nothing to say about it. I still can't get a point of its presence in the game. Day 4 was the first level including the Buckethead zombie. Well, it was quicker than I thought it would be. When you've got enough snapdragons in the lawn, this zombie can be defeated in a standard way. However, when it appears too early, it creates too many problems. The low and upper lines are the most susceptible to such attacks. Day 5 was the prime example of how the seagull zombie can easily reach the lawnmower, and you can do nothing with that. Next time, I should pay more attention to water lines, as they are the main threat to my brain. At this point, I still have so many plant foods that I don't even know what to do with them. I wish I had them more in my next worlds. Day 6 was a repeat of Day 5, but this time I didn't lose the lawnmower in the same way I had on the previous level, so the lesson was learned successfully. Day 7 introduced a barrel roller zombie, which may cause us some trouble due to the hidden imps inside of it. In a worst case scenario, they can consume a cold snap and reach a lawnmower, so we should be aware of such a serious enemy. Luckily, it didn't happen with us on this level, so we can move to the next one. On Day 9, bad things started to happen. After the first wave, the Buckethead zombie had consumed my lovely Cold Snap like it was nothing to him. The second time the Buckethead came close to my Snapdragon, I didn't want to play the Russian roulette, so I fed my body with a plant food, which immediately stopped the zombie attack. Day 10 introduced us to a zombie that we can't simply defeat, as Imp Cannon is usually placed in a way that is unreachable for a Cold Snap. That is why I had to place a few Snapdragons at the back of the lawn, so when the cannon explodes, I would be able to deal with all the upcoming imps. As you may see, I made the right decision, since the imp attack was a serious obstacle to beating the level. However, we didn't lose a single lawnmower, so I count that as a victory. On day 11, I tried to place Snapdragons differently due to the appearance of all the 9 zombies on a single level. At that point, we can't simply place Snapdragons like we want to, as we always have to be ready for the attack of the Imp Cannon. On the other hand, it's a good obstacle that makes the gameplay much more interesting. Day 14 was the first last stand level of the Pirate Seas, for which I decided to place the maximum amount of Cold Snapdragons to make sure that the lawn is secured and not a single plant is going to be lost while beating the level. Even Popka the Parrot was shocked by the amount of Cold Snaps placed on the lawn. The rest of the level went pretty fine and not a single Cold Snap was lost while beating it. On day 15, I got a free cool body at the back of the lawn. Using a pre-planted plants isn't forbidden by my rules, so I'm allowed to play with a green body. The number of zombies we saw on the lawn was perfect for such a level, as we finally got the necessary hardness, which makes the gameplay insanely enjoyable. Day 16 was too easy to speak about, as sprint beans didn't actually need to be protected. Instead, they were protecting us from all the zombies we saw while beating the level. Everything was so cool that I didn't have to use the plant food to stop the zombie horde. Nothing special happened on day 17, except for a great number of imp cannons, which affected the placement of my Snapdragons all across the lawn. I had to ensure that none of the blow-ups would affect my defense line, and thus activating the lawnmowers. As you probably understood, everything went pretty good. Day 22 is one of my favorite last stand levels in the game, and this time I beat it in one of the most unusual ways. After spending all the given sun, only 3 tiles were left without a Cold Snapdragon. Fortunately, only a few plants were lost while beating the level, and if only I had correctly placed them, I wouldn't have lost a single Snapdragon, but that's just the details. On day 23, only a few Snapdragons were needed to beat the level, as it was a full copy of one of the first levels. Well, at least I had some fun while freezing the zombies. Day 24 was the final battle of the Pirate Seas, where we had to defend a few sprint beans from being eaten by zombie pirates. The hardest thing about this level was of course the imp cannons, as I had no opportunity to stop them. Fortunately, sprint beans were good at catapulting zombies into the water, so we didn't have to replay this level over and over. Of course, a few cold snaps were eaten while beating the level, but that's the least price we could pay for beating it. With that been done, we are moving to the Wild West. Day 1 of the Wild West introduced us to the minecarts, a mechanic that isn't going to be used a lot in today's campaign, since I prefer building a full lane of cold snaps rather than placing them in different positions. We're still at the point where level 1 is an easy one, so let's enjoy this moment. Day 2 had already introduced us to a prospector zombie, which is going to cause lots of trouble in the future. However, at this point it isn't so dangerous, but it makes me plant my cold snaps a few tiles ahead of where I usually do. It doesn't seem to look like a big problem until you meet a buckethead zombie, and you've got only a few cold snapdragons on your lawn. Fortunately, everything went fine this time, but I'm already preparing you for the questions we will solve in the future. Day 3 is a day of annoying piano music. However, we don't really care about its appearance, since cold snaps can cover each lane with its ice shots, so that the piano guy couldn't impress us. On day 5, we finally met my lovely Poncho Zombie, who is a true legend in the world of PVZ 2. If you're lucky enough, you will be stuck with the guy without a toaster on his belly. However, if you were me, the first poncho zombie you would see would contain the metal protection. Thank God I had that plant food in my pocket. It is only level 5 of the Wild West, but it feels like day 24 of the Pirate Seas. Day 6 was the first last stand level of this universe, and today we have a truly unique defense line, which consisted of cold snaps. Yeah, that is so unique. Considering a high number of poncho zombies alone with piano dudes, I am actually impressed that only a few snapdragons were consumed at such a battle. On day 7, plant foods became crucial to stopping the poncho guys at the beginning of the level, as I could do nothing against them. However, when a full defense line is completed, there is no reason to use them, as cold snaps can stop them on their own. Day 10 is an official day of frozen chicken. The first experience with chickens was fine, as none of them were able to get close to my cold snaps. Yet, I'm worried about their appearance when the line of cold snaps is still forming, meaning that some chickens can run up to my lawnmowers, and I'm actually scared of that. On day 11, I could spend only 500 suns, and that was the first time I used minecarts in today's challenge. They were actually needed in such a situation, as it was the only way to defeat the coneheads. If I planted cold snaps on the standard tiles, the coneheads would bypass my defense and then reach the lawnmowers. Of course, we couldn't afford it, so I was maneuvering minecarts like a pro. On day 13, we met our first bull zombie, which was immediately stopped with the help of the plant food. Yeah, that's probably the most dangerous zombie we face in the Wild West. It's hard for me to imagine stopping it without the plant food, as this zombie is a double headache. Not only the bull is a problem, but it's an imp zombie as well. The further we come, the more specific the problems become. On day 14, I was a few steps away from losing the level due to the annoying chickens that had activated the lawnmowers and thus provoking more chickens to appear on the lawn. Well, at least the piano man could pose no threat to us, so the only problem we had to deal with was chickens. If only I could fry them, I could become a millionaire and build my own KFC. Day 15 repeated one of the first levels and nothing remarkable had happened while beating it, so let's move to the next one. On day 16, we had to protect Johnny the Walnut from being consumed by our beloved zombie buddies. I was worried about Johnny's survival, so I even decided to feed him with a plant food, so that he could survive the massive zombie attack. Sometimes he was really useful in case of stopping the enemies right before reaching the cold snaps. Day 17 was a challenging level where I had to save the weird flowers from zombie trampolines. The number of metal poncho zombies along with bucket heads was really high, so plant foods were essential in beating the level. If Pirate Seas along with ancient Egypt can be called easy worlds, then the Wild West is a stage of a medium hardness, since it wasn't that easy to beat it, and there are a lot of situations in which Cold Snap struggles to defeat the zombies. Day 18 was a fast one, as we needed only 1 minute and 10 seconds to finish it. Of course, a few snapdragons were lost while beating the level, primarily due to the chickens, but nevertheless, winners are not judged. Day 19 is a copy of Day 5, but with a few additional restrictions. It's hard to say something new about this level, since the new limits couldn't affect me, and I was playing this level like I usually do. On day 21, we once again protected the weird flowers from zombie trampoline. This time we managed to defeat the bucketheads without using plant foods, which was a massive achievement for us. What about the sun limits? Well, they couldn't affect me, since I'm not even able to get that amount of sun during the level. Day 23 is yet another level with the same restrictions. That's not funny at all. It wasn't that hard, but chickens were always 2 steps away from consuming my cold snaps, which made me worry about my snowy friends. And I don't like when someone makes me worry about my plants. On day 24, we had to defend 3 Johnnies simultaneously. That is a lot. My main goal for the entire level was to plant as many cold snaps as possible, as I knew about the final wave and the number of zombie bulls we would be stuck with. Fortunately for us, the defense line was prepared for a massive zombie attack and it was time to deal with the bulls. Thanks to a good preparation and a few magical plant foods, we managed to deal with the bulls and protect the walnuts from being eaten. Now we know who is the sheriff of this town. With that been done, we are moving to the Frostbite Caves. Day 1 of the Frostbite Caves began with melting a few pre-planted Johnnies and alone. Without a doubt, they played a major role in stopping the zombie horde by accumulating the bite force of bucket heads. Thanks to the walnuts, they couldn't get close to my snapdragons. Compared to the first levels of the previous 3 worlds, this one was much harder than all of them combined. Still, we succeeded, and none of the lone movers was lost while beating it. On day 2, my lovely walnuts were saving the situation once again, as the number of bucket heads had significantly increased, so we needed more cold snaps to deal with them. Only after beating the level could I realize that repeaters could be also melted, but I didn't see that opportunity while playing it. Day 4 means no Johnnies at the lone, so we have to find another way to beat it. Fortunately, that opportunity was found, and that is the correct placement of cold snaps. Yeah, that's how simple it is. Just find the right tiles to put snapdragons and they will be highly efficient. On day 6, we had a fantastic opportunity to get some additional sun by melting the sunflowers. Unfortunately for zombies, the cold snap can't be frozen, so it's immune to any wind or snowballs. Unexpectedly, even 2 sunflowers are way more than enough to generate enough suns to prepare a great defense line against the upcoming zombies. On day 7, my cold snaps were supported by Split P, which was actually useful, as both of his sides were working like a machine gun. However, it's not immune to the cold, so we had to save him every time the little dude became frozen. Day 9 was the official day of the dodo bird. It isn't that effective against the cold snap, but it can surely cause us some trouble while dealing with the rest of the horde. However, if you have a few lanes of snapdragons, this bird isn't a problem for you anymore. Day 11 is one of my favorite levels of the Frostbite Caves, as it combines a good hardness with the right amount of zombies and opportunities to deal with them. It won't be a huge surprise if I tell you that I started building my defense right from the final tiles, and step by step I was moving closer to the next tiles to expand the safe zone. Without a doubt, it was one of the best battles we saw in the first part of the Cold Snap adventure, since we defeated numerous bucket heads alone with the ice cubes without using all the plant foods. My main mistake on day 12 was the placement of cold snaps, as I put them too far away from the battlefield, so had to wait for a while for zombies to come close to my defense line. Except for that, everything was made right, since none of the cold snaps were consumed during a battle. On day 13, I repeated my strategy from day 11, where I began to settle the cold snaps right from the final tiles, and then, step by step, expanded them on the next few tiles, thus forming a good defense line for the rest of the lines. Don't forget that in this world, the zombies can't be frozen, so when dealing with the gargantuar, you have to be sure that you've got enough plant foods to stop it before it reaches the lone mover. Day 15 was probably one of the hardest levels of the first part of the Frostbite Caves, as since we're going too fast and the tile placement wasn't the best. Furthermore, there was only one plant food for the entire level, and for the rest of it, I was maneuvering my cold snaps only to save the pepper pools from being eaten by zombies. Honestly, I couldn't imagine that I would beat it on my first attempt, as the level seemed impossible. On day 17, we had to melt a lot of ice to release our friends from an ice age. It allowed us not only to kick away the dodos, but also to stop the frozen imps from getting close to my cold snaps. I like the Frostbite Caves for allowing us to play with lots of different plants throughout this time adventure. Now the cold snaps doesn't feel alone in the frozen world. Day 19 included many frozen plants, but only a few were released from the ice age. Even though the snowstorms attempted to break my defense, the cold snaps were staying like rock in its place, which nothing and no one could break. On day 20, all the local zombies were defeated without using a single plant food. Yeah, at this point, it's undoubtedly a huge success, as not even the ice cubes could break my defense due to the high number of cold snaps. Cold Snapdragon is cooking in this universe. Day 22 is a definition of phrase, and U is equal to a new plant, because this time we had some cute looking guacadoles being frozen in the ice. However, it's not all, because this level was also dedicated to whistles, which are a local edition of chickens. They shouldn't be underestimated, as they are as dangerous as running chicken from KFC. Day 23 is a fantastic opportunity to grind a great amount of sun and place as many cold snaps as possible. Of course, I couldn't miss that opportunity, so I placed 4 lanes of cold snaps and defeated the zombies like a pro. On day 26, I was able to melt the ice at one of the sun shrooms and thus gathered some more suns for the rest of the level. Here the only working strategy was one that I used on some of the previous top levels, where we began planting cold snaps right from the final tiles, and then, step by step, we expanded them further into the lawn. What impressed me the most was the number of zombies prepared for that level, as they were coming to the lawn without stopping. Day 27 was undoubtedly the hardest level of the Frostbite Caves for numerous reasons, and zombie spam was one of them. Not without the losses, but we managed to hold the zombie attack and even stop a few gargs from reaching my rotabagas blazed on the banana cells. Of course, some snapdragons were lost during the battle, but that's the least price we could pay for beating it. Day 28 was the last stand level, for which I decided to place 3 lanes of cold snaps so nothing and no one could break it. Everything went as well as we expected, so only a few snapdragons were lost during a battle with gargantuars. Unlike a big body, little imps could do nothing to me, as I prepared a few cold snaps to deal against them. So the Frostbite Caves are finished, and so is the first part of the challenge. It's November, and we're coming closer to the Christmas and the New Year holidays, so I hope that my challenge will boost your winter holiday mood, as Cold Snap really wants to do that. The next video is coming soon, my fellow ice cubes.